You have been taught that sexual energy is something you either have or you do not, that it is a fixed trait. Some people burn with it, others simply run cold. That framing has cost you more than you realize. Jung never treated sexual energy as a static quantity. He understood libido as the total psychic energy available to the personality, the current behind desire, creativity, will, presence, the capacity to feel fully engaged with your own existence. When that energy goes dormant, you do not simply lose interest in sex, you lose interest in yourself. The flatness you feel is not laziness. It is not depression in the clinical sense. It is the psyche withdrawing its energy from conscious life because something essential has been suppressed for too long. Most people numb this withdrawal with routines, distractions, relationships that require nothing of them emotionally. They mistake the absence of pain for peace. But Jung saw clearly what that numbness actually signals. The unlived life generating a gravitational pull inward, away from vitality, away from eros in its deepest sense. Eros, for Jung, was not limited to the sexual. It was the binding force of life itself, the drive toward connection, meaning, and creative engagement with reality. When it goes dormant, everything loses texture. Work becomes mechanical, intimacy becomes transactional. You move through your days with competence but without presence, and you cannot name what is missing because the culture never gave you the vocabulary for it. What is missing is not a feeling, it is not a hormone, it is access to the deepest current running through your own psyche, and it did not die. It was buried. Understanding why it was buried is the first act of awakening. The burial did not happen in a single moment. It accumulated. Every time you overrode your instinct to preserve someone else's comfort, you redirected energy downward into the unconscious. Every time you muted an authentic response because it would have been inconvenient, you taught the psyche that its raw material was unwelcome. Jung called this the construction of the persona, the functional mask that allows social participation. But the persona was never designed to replace the self. It was designed to mediate between inner reality and outer demand. When the persona calcifies, when it stops being a bridge and becomes a prison, the energy that once flowed freely begins pooling in the shadow. This is where dormant sexual energy actually resides, not in the body, in the shadow, in the parts of yourself you were taught to disown, your hunger, your intensity, your capacity for pleasure without apology, your right to want without justification. The shadow does not store only darkness, it stores every quality the conscious personality could not integrate. For many people, especially those raised in environments that equated desire with danger or selfishness with sin, the shadow holds enormous reserves of creative and erotic power. You did not lose your fire. You relocated it to the one place you would never voluntarily look. And the unconscious, as Jung observed, does not simply hold what is repressed, it amplifies it. The longer a vital force remains buried, the more distorted its expression becomes when it finally surfaces, emerging not as desire but as compulsion, not as passion but as destructive restlessness. The path to awakening is not through force, it is through honest confrontation with what you buried and why you believe the burial was necessary. The cost of dormancy. Living with dormant sexual energy is not neutral. It is expensive. The psyche does not tolerate prolonged suppression without extracting a cost, and that cost shows up in places you would never connect to the original wound. Jung was explicit about this. Energy that is denied conscious expression does not dissipate. It converts. It becomes chronic tension held in the body with no identifiable source. It becomes irritability that flares at small provocations, because the real provocation, the unlived life, cannot be addressed directly. It becomes a peculiar exhaustion that no amount of rest resolves, because what is fatigued is not the body but the will. You begin attracting the same relational pattern repeatedly, people who need your energy but cannot reciprocate, situations that demand your output but never your depth. This is not coincidence. Jung understood that the unconscious arranges external circumstances to mirror internal conditions. When vital energy is suppressed, the psyche constructs a life that confirms the suppression, surroundings that require performance, never presence. The most insidious cost is the loss of imaginative capacity. Jung linked libido directly to the capacity for symbolic thinking, for vision, for the kind of creative engagement that makes life feel dimensional rather than flat. When sexual energy goes dormant, the imagination narrows. You stop dreaming, literally and figuratively. The future becomes a series of obligations rather than a field of possibility, and you accept this diminishment as realism. You call it being practical. You tell yourself that intensity is for younger versions of you, that wanting too much is a sign of immaturity rather than a sign of life. That resignation is not wisdom. It is the final symptom of a psyche that has lost access to its own generative core. The retrieval. Awakening dormant energy is not an act of acquisition. You are not adding something you lack. You are retrieving something you disowned. Jung's entire model of individuation rests on this distinction, that wholeness is not constructed from external materials, but recovered from internal exile. The first movement is recognition, not understanding. Recognition. You must feel where the energy went. This is not intellectual work. It is somatic and emotional. It requires you to sit with the specific moments where you learned that your desire was dangerous, your intensity was too much, your hunger was a burden on the people who were supposed to welcome it. Those moments created the architecture of suppression. They installed the reflexive withdrawal that now operates below your awareness. The second movement is differentiation. Jung insisted that the unconscious contains everything, not only what was repressed, but what was never developed. Dormant sexual energy is often fused with material that has nothing to do with sexuality at all. Rage that was never expressed, grief that was never completed, ambition that was never permitted. The energy appears sexual because the erotic carries the highest voltage, but what you are actually unfreezing is a composite of every vital impulse that was denied passage into conscious life. You must learn to separate these threads. You must discover what portion of the dormancy is sexual, what portion is creative, what portion is spiritual, and what portion is simply the accumulated cost of years spent performing a self that was never fully yours. The third movement is expression, not reckless, not performative, but deliberate and embodied. Jung never prescribed a formula. He described a posture, radical honesty about what you actually want, combined with the discipline to let that honesty reshape your choices. The world shifts. When dormant energy begins to move again, the first thing that changes is not your circumstances. It is your perception. Colors do not literally become brighter, but attention becomes fuller. You notice what you had been filtering out: texture in conversation, resonance in music, the weight of silence between two people who are actually present with each other. Jung described this as the return of participation mystique, the archaic sense of being woven into the fabric of experience rather than observing it from behind glass. People around you will register the shift before you can articulate it. They will not call it sexual energy, they will call it presence, confidence, something different about you that they cannot name. What they are sensing is the restoration of psychic coherence, the alignment between what you feel and what you express, between your interior life and your visible one. But this is also where turbulence begins. Not everyone will welcome your awakening. Some will experience your restored vitality as a disruption because it mirrors what they have buried in themselves. Jung's shadow dynamic operates here with precision. Your aliveness becomes an accusation they did not request. Old relationships may become strained, not because you have become unkind, but because you have stopped participating in the mutual agreement to remain diminished. You will be tempted to retreat, to soften the energy, to apologize for taking up more space than you used to. That temptation is the final test of the persona, its last attempt to reassert control over a psyche that has outgrown it. The awakening does not ask you to become aggressive. It asks something harder. It asks you to remain visible when every conditioned reflex in your body is telling you to shrink. The integration. The final stage is not triumph. It is integration, and integration, as Jung described it, is the most demanding labor the psyche can undertake. It means holding your restored energy without inflating around it. It means recognizing that the same force that feels like liberation can, if unexamined, become its own compulsion. You do not awaken dormant energy and then coast. You awaken it and learn to carry it precisely. This requires confronting a difficult truth. Some of the dormancy served a purpose. Part of you chose the numbness because the alternative, feeling everything, wanting fully, being present without armor, was too exposed. Integration means acknowledging that the suppression was partially your own strategy, not merely the world's demand. Jung never romanticized the unconscious. He understood that what returns from repression comes back charged, volatile, seeking expression with the urgency of everything denied too long. The discipline is not to cage it again, but to give it structure, creative work, embodied practice, relationships that hold intensity without collapsing into consumption, self-examination that does not flinch when the energy reveals aspects of you that are not gentle, not accommodating, not easy. Wholeness is not softness. It includes your capacity for fierceness, for refusal, for desire that does not apologize. The integration is complete not when you feel perpetually alive, but when you can tolerate the full range of what aliveness includes. its discomfort alongside its beauty, its solitude alongside its intimacy, its weight alongside its freedom. You were never broken, you were never empty. You were buried under a life that asked you to be less than what you are, and you complied until compliance became invisible. The awakening is not becoming someone new, it is refusing at last to be less